Hey, I'm Brad,
And I'm Starla,
and this is the Fruitful Family Podcast.
where we will talk about faith, family, and farming.
So, this is our first episode, and so what we hope to do is not shake the camera too much and move the table. Uh, we want to kind of just give an overview of why we're doing this podcast and what we hope to cover. And we hope that our distractions are minimal because we just put our kids to bed. So we're hoping they stay there tonight. So I'm going to start off by asking Starla because, to be honest, this is all her idea. And when she has an idea, I like to make it happen. And so I buy equipment and stuff and execute things. But why don't you share why you wanted to do this podcast?
There are multiple reasons that I want to do this podcast. I think one of the primary reasons is to leave a legacy for our children. Why do we do what we do? Really, we're doing what we're doing because we think that the way we're living honors the Lord, and we want to give our children and ourselves the best life that we can, that we think honors God. And we want to share that with you because we have learned a lot of things over the last 11 years of being married that we
7 years of homesteading and stuff.
think will be really helpful for other people to hear. And some of it you may know already, and some of it might be new.
Okay. So obviously our tagline is where we talk things faith, family, and farming. And so we just kind of want to give a brief overview in this first episode here about why those things are important to us, why we want to talk about those things, where the intersection of all of those things are for us and our family. And so I'll kick that off with the now I'm doing the with faith. And if you can see behind us, this is what is remaining of mostly my pastoral personal library. A lot of the books that I have collected over nearly 2 decades of pastoral ministry, serving in local churches as initially youth pastor, and then as an executive pastor at a small church, then as a church planter, then going through a church merger. And so we definitely have that background, but our faith is the most important thing to us. And our hope is that everything that we do is that the faith is foundational to all of that. And so it affects the family. It affects, for us, the size of our family and everything that goes with that. And it also affects our desire as homesteaders, farmers, and business owners to steward our land and all of our resources. So we hope to discuss different topics related to faith. We might take specific episodes and talk just about a faith issue. Maybe it's something that we're talking about and working through, or something our church is going through. Though I'm not serving as a pastor of a church, we're members of a local church here in our community, and which I have the opportunity to do occasional preaching and things like that. But we want to talk about those things. What about family?
Yeah, so there are a lot of different topics we could cover that have to do with our family in particular, how we stay well, how we manage 8 children and a homestead, and both of us working. So we work from home, but we still work, and we do work, I would say, a good bit. So how do we
With a
manage
healthy
our
dose of
family,
naps, at least on my part.
or when I'm pregnant? Uh, but also, I think topics that would include um, how we even came to be a family and what that entails for us in particular. Because I think without while honoring our families that we came from, I think we can talk about where we came from and how we've arrived at some of the positions that we have for our own family. And that is obviously informed by our faith.
Yeah. And then lastly, farming, which is something that we have grown to love. And we have grown in skill and knowledge over the past, I'd say it's about 7 years since we kind of started, give or take.
Probably. I don't know. It's been a busy 11 years.
It's been a good busy 11 years together, which I don't know when we're going to make this podcast live, but 1 week from today of recording this is our 11th anniversary. So, and she still looks at me like that.
We love each other.
But we have grown in our desire to farm, to steward land, to do husbandry with animals, and all of those things that come with that. And there's a lot of lessons, a lot of mistakes that we've made along the way, mistakes that we still make this far into it, even as full-time homesteaders slash business owners. um, Still making mistakes, still learning how to work with each other in that capacity as well. And so there are those topics that we like to talk about too. Everything from, um, I'd say we probably, maybe not this year because we've taken some time off from livestock, but last year between dairy and chickens and cows, we probably raised 75-80% of our own food, I think,
Probably. I
give or
mean,
take.
somewhere around there. I mean, we're still not too far off of that, really.
Yeah. So just some of those topics that we want to talk about too. And we hope that each of those topics will probably touch on all the different areas at the same time, just because there's so much a part of our life that if we have an episode dedicated to family, we're going to talk about our faith. We're going to talk about um, how we have a family and a farm and what that looks like.
And why you should too.
It's not for everybody, but it is for our family. It's absolutely one of the best decisions we've ever made together.
Absolutely.
Regardless of how hasty it may have been.
It wasn't hasty. It was a long time in coming by the time we actually
By the
moved
time we
here.
got to it, yeah.
So that's a good segue into sharing our story. So I'll start.
Go for it.
Brad and I met on Match.com 12 years ago, and we quickly fell in love.
We don't get any royalties for plugging
Yeah.
Match.com.
I'm not sure we would be able to meet on Match.com today, but we did then. It was the sovereign hand of God. I was not walking with the Lord faithfully at that point. And God used Brad to bring me back to himself and to a vibrant and robust Reformed faith. It took me a few hard conversations and listening to some good, solid, theologically solid uh, podcasts to, and also sitting under faithful preaching to come back to a faithful and theologically sound relationship with God. And then
It was systematic theology.
it was. I listened to Wayne Grudem's systematic theology podcast. I had veered into deep liberalism, and I had a dash of new age theology thrown in there too. And I had really let go of the atonement, the idea that Jesus' death on the cross is salvific and
And
can
even necessary.
right. And can you really be a Christian if you let go of that? I would say no. So God in his sovereignty and goodness didn't allow me to die during that time, because I became a Christian when I was 14. And I did walk through rebellion for sure for a season. And so God was kind to draw me back to himself, using my husband primarily to do that before we got married. And then we got married after 11 months of knowing each other.
At the
And
time, so Starla had uprooted. She was living in Eastern Kentucky when we met. So we started, not only did we start online, we started long distance for the first 3 or so months. She uprooted and moved to my city, kind of just 3 months in, and it was kind of a Hail Mary, I guess. I don't.
it was
It was either
either
go back with your parents or move here and
Mhm.
see where this goes. And it worked. It worked out by God's grace. Um, but I was law enforcement at the time, and we had both gone through divorces, and so we were in an interesting position, approaching 30. I was 30. She was approaching 30, and it was kind of a no games courtship, if you can call it that.
Definitely. On our first date, he said, "Hey, I want to get married again. I want to have children. So if you're just looking for a fun time," which honestly I was, that was what I was looking for. He said, "We'll have fun tonight, and that's it." And I had already fallen in love with him pretty much. So I decided, I guess I'm going to be in a relationship. And I am eternally thankful to God. He saved me from so much heartache by giving me Brad. And we both have not looked back since.
Mm,
So we got married after a 10-month courtship, and we knew we
11,
11 months.
11 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we knew we wanted
Timeline's fuzzy.
to have children. And so I was disappointed that I didn't get pregnant on our honeymoon, but the next month after that, I did get pregnant. And I think maybe that could be a conversation for another podcast, because I had been on birth control previously and I went off it before we got married, but I really thought I would struggle with infertility just because so many people in our generation have. And I think birth control has at least contributed to that. But the Lord was kind, and we got pregnant quickly. And then we just kept getting pregnant. And
And before you guys start commenting, we know what causes it. We're very aware of what causes that. Um, it's not mixing our laundry together or swimming in the same pool. Maybe we'll have a separate episode just for that. Maybe not. We don't want to get flagged. But we get asked that question all the time. And so as a big family, right, with 8 kids, we have we live out in the country now, but before we used to live in a downtown area, and there was a walking bridge that connected our city in southern Indiana to Louisville, Kentucky. And it was pretty easy for us to, just shoot down to the bridge on a pretty night, go for a walk on the bridge with all of our kids. We didn't have all of the kids at the time.
think
We've
it
had 3 kids since we've lived here.
Yeah, we only had 5 kids at the time.
And, we get all the questions. Are they all yours? You got your hands full. What
You know what
else?
causes
You
that,
know what
right?
causes that? And I tried to be witty, but it just doesn't come across as
And I think some people mean it to, they're trying to be encouraging sometimes. But then some people genuinely have looked at our family, especially now we have even more than that, and they're just genuinely stumped at how we could have so many children, especially I think at this time in
or
history.
why? Why would we have so many
Don't
kids?
you realize what a burden they are? Don't you realize how expensive they are? I think it kind of oozes out of them when they
You
say,
guys must be independently wealthy. No.
and I'm sure that we will talk about this on other episodes, but really, we have come to realize that children are a gift from the
Mhm.
Lord and they are enjoyable and they are cute and sweet and hard daily at different points, but so worth any sacrifice you have to make.
And without going into all the details, I mean, this is not necessarily a conviction that we've always had.
Mhm.
Um, we we've had the doctor's appointments and um, decided before we even got to the parking lot that this was not what we needed to do. This was not the thing for us. And I believe since that doctor's appointment, we've had four
Mhm.
four kids, I believe.
All of them at home
And all of
before
those have been
before after the consultation.
home births. So just a blessing. We joke about it all the time. The kids know, you know, mommy, how many kids did you want to have when you were a kid? Like when everyone asks you how many kids you want to have when you're a grown up, what would you say?
Maybe 3 or 4.
Yeah. My answer was as many as the Lord would allow me to provide for, which meant sounded great, but I meant 2. I wanted 2 kids because I thought that that's all I could provide for. Especially as a young guy pursuing ministry, assuming that I wasn't going to make a lot of money. And um, I'm so glad I was wrong. So that's a lot. Just getting to kids and family. Well, how about farming?
Farming, yeah. So, I think it was around kid number 3. Maybe kid number 3 was a baby, and we had decided not to do anything to prevent more pregnancies, and I really wanted meat that was grass-fed, that wasn't ridiculously expensive, and I just thought hunting was cool. So, masculine. And I really encouraged Brad to hunt. And I'd asked him to do it a few times. He used to be a police officer, so I knew he could shoot an animal if he got close enough to it. He just was really hesitant to
And
learn to
in
hunt.
my mind, sitting 15 to 20 feet up in the air during freezing weather, not moving at the hopes that an animal might walk by and possibly shoot it did not seem fun to me. It just wasn't entertaining to me at all. And um so when we were planting our church, we were having a neighborhood lunch at my mom's house and one of her neighbors came and he was an older guy who his wife wasn't 100% on board with him going into the woods by himself anymore. And so he was kind of not actively looking for a hunting buddy, but open to the idea. And I showed up late to this community meal. Do you remember that?
I do kind of. I guess I'm the one that
And by the
said,
time I showed up to the meal, I was going hunting with this guy and I had no clue. And um I'll remember I don't it was January 1st. It was the last day of deer season
mm,
that season, and I shot my first deer with my 12 gauge shotgun. I was shaking. I learned how to field dress that day. I learned how heavy a deer body was. And then I learned how to process a deer, like an entire deer. We didn't take it to a processor. He he showed me how to field dress. He showed me how to process, get all the meat, the best cuts, and all of that stuff just in a matter of weeks after shooting that first deer. And even I think it was even that night when I came home from the field and we had taken like the tenderloin. I think we'd taken the tenderloin out of the deer that day, and we cooked it that night, and I was hooked. Like that was so hunting was my gateway drug to all things farming. And from there it was like an obsession.
it did. He had a chicken problem for a while. He kept buying chickens. So when we lived in Jeffersonville, the city had lifted their farm animal restrictions for a time because they were rewriting their laws. And so we could basically have as many and almost anything as we wanted.
And boy did we.
And we did have a lot. And so at one point, we had meat rabbits and a whole bunch of chickens, some meat chickens, and a few goats
And a beehive at one time.
and a beehive and a small garden with some fruit trees.
On a
And
less than a quarter acre. This was a quarter acre property that included our 1,200 square foot house.
mhm.
So not a lot of space to work with. And, I was milking a goat once a day, and we were butchering chickens and getting a couple dozen eggs a day, and
Our neighbors loved us.
all but one.
So that's a good segue into moving. So we felt like, well, Brad really wanted to move to the country and I just wasn't quite ready yet. But there was,
The more time I spent in the woods hunting, the more time I spent driving around the woods, and I would find myself just watching tree lines looking for deer. And I started reading Joel Salatin books, and we discovered Justin Rhodes on YouTube, and all these things just started like firing in my brain and clicking, and I got to scheming. And go ahead.
so I wasn't quite ready to move to the country yet, but there was, after an argument that we had one night, I felt very strongly that the Lord wanted me to stop getting in the way of moving to the country, that I needed to submit to Brad, and that would be good for our family. And so um, we started seriously looking for properties, and the Lord provided kindly for us to move to the country. And we are so thankful that it happened when it did.
We moved in 2019. April of 2019 is when we moved. And so here on our farm, we call Walker Family Homestead here in Southern Indiana. We've since built a commercial kitchen for our elderberry business, Abby's Elderberry. And so we moved here. If we had waited 6 months to find this place, it may have been more. I mean, the price would have exponentially increased. And even finding this place, the house had 2 contracts on it
Mm.
before we got to it, and both of them fell through within a 10-day window. There was a contract, an accepted contract, and like a secondary backup contract, and both of them fell through in 10 days. And so, what a provision, what a blessing for us that we found this place. We have cleared land. We've since put fences and built pastures. And then we have wooded acreage in the back that allows us to hunt. We've gotten wild turkey back there. We've got obviously deer back there. Me and our 10-year-old son, one of his first hunting trips. Remember when we brought back? We didn't see any deer.
Is that the groundhog?
We brought back a groundhog. We saw a groundhog, put it in the smoker, and it was pretty stinking delicious.
It was good. So we moved right before COVID hit. And with as many children as we had, with all that surrounded COVID, especially in our area, everything that was going on, it just would have been a time rife with anxiety.
There was a lot more going on in the community at that time too, besides COVID.
Mm-hmm. So it really was such a blessing, and the Lord's provision and timing that we moved when we did.
So we've been here 4 years now, and we've almost moved once. A couple months ago, we had an accepted offer on an Amish farm about 15 miles from us, and just as quickly as it happened, it fell apart. Which also is the Lord's kindness and provision for us. And so we are happy and content where we are, and hope to have many more years here. So I mean, that's just a brief snapshot of our story. We have several ideas, like 30 something ideas of episodes of where we want to take this, and there's some alternating topics between faith, family, and farming. But we would like to know what you would like to hear. So in the comments, if there is something you'd be interested in hearing, revolving around either of those 3 topics, we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment, and we'd be happy to consider addressing those things. Any parting words that you have?
Just looking forward to sharing lots of things that we've learned over the years with you all.
We hope that you'll like our page, subscribe. You'll get automatic updates. We will put links in the notes where you can find our businesses, and also a couple other things that we love and we support. And we hope that you'll take advantage of those things as well. But thanks for tuning in to episode 1, and here's to episode 2.